Okay. Amar Rabbi Nachman. So it says Rabbi Nachman, this is a Rabbi Nachman, the Gemara is going to talk a little bit about another issue about, it says that Chulda is mibnei bonov shel Yehoshua hoiso. That this Chulda, the prophet, was from the grandsons of Yehoshua. Now the Gemara is going to make a very far equation over here. The Gemara is going to learn this very far. In other words, it says over here, the Gemara is going to say like this, Ksiv Hacha, in this verse, this is a verse in Melachim Beis, Pasuk Perek Chav Beis. It says here, Ben Cherchas. I'll read for you the Pasuk in a minute. But the key word here, it says the son of Cherchas. It says. And by Yehoshua, when they buried him, it says Betimnas Cheres. You see the word Cherches and the word Cheres. You see they're almost the same. This has an extra ches. It's Cheres Cheres. The Gemara thinks that this Cherches that is written by Chulchos is associated with the Cheres that is written by Yehoshua. Since Yehoshua was buried in Timnas Cheres, so when he was the son of Cherches, that's connected. It gets even more difficult. Let's just look at the pasuk. The pasuk says basically, "Vayelech Hilkiyahu HaKohen." So this is talking about after the story in which, maybe make this a drop bigger. This is talking about where Hilkiyahu HaKohen, he was, he went to ask the prophet Chulda. They found the sefer in the Beis Hamikdash. So Hilkiyahu HaKohen and Achikom and Achboir and Shafon and Asoya, where did they go to? All these people went El Chulda HaNeviah. The prophet is Chulda HaNeviah. That's where we find Chulda the Neviah. Who was Chulda HaNeviah? It says Eshes Shalom, the wife of Shalom, who was Chulda's husband? Shalom. Shalom was the son of Tikva, who was the son of Charches. Shalom was the son of Tikva, and Tikva was the son of Charches. So we're not even talking about Chulda HaNeviah. It doesn't say that Chulda HaNeviah was the son of Tikva. Her husband was Shalom, who was the son of Tikva and Charchus. Nevertheless, it says here that she was the son, that her husband was the son of Charchus. It's written in the same pasuk over here. So the Gemara uses this, since it says over here, Chulda, it says here, Ben Charchus, and Rashi explains, even though the pasuk was testifying who her husband was, we're not even talking about Chulda. How could you bring in the Charches as the connection to Chulda? It's talking about her husband. But Mihu b'ma'aseho k'siv. It's written about her action. It's written by what she was doing. She came the prophet, and we write this name over there. So that makes her related to Charchus. Uksiv Hossam, by Yeshua, it says, B'timnas Cheres. He was buried in Timnas Cheres. Let's look in the pasuk. By Yikburu Oisoi, they buried him, Yeshua. B'gvul Machlosoi, in the boundary of B'timnas Cheres. Looks like this was a portion, a name that they gave for a descendant of his. That's called it Timnas Cheres. So this Timnas Cheres is the same as this charchas over here, and that's the relationship. Now, again, it seems a little far-fetched. It seems like quite stretching it. I don't know with the Mefarshim over there how they explain it, but it's there's a hint of a hint, like to this. It must mean that the Gemara has some other evidence that this was the case, just trying to find a sort of a connection, finding somehow a connection over there, because it seems like a little difficult to conclude from this statement of Charches to go ahead and say that. It seems a little difficult. Zog the Gemara, Eisver Rabbeinu Sova leRab Nachman. Rabbeinu Sova had a question to Rab Nachman. He says, from a brisa, seems like it's not a son of Yeshua. Why? Because it says like this: Shmoina Neviim Heim, Vehem Kohanim. There were 8 prophets, and all these 8 prophets were priests, were Kohanim. And they were all descendants, Yotze Merochav Hazoina. Remember Rachav the harlot, that was the woman that was sitting in Jericho, in Yericho, at the gate, and that's where they came when Yeshua sent the spies, Kolev and Pinchas. They ended up in the house of Rachav Hazoina, and she protected them. Apparently, after they saved, her life was saved, she converted. We'll see later on in the Gemara also. And she married. Now, since she's a convert, I have to figure this out. If we say she's a convert, then technically a Kohen is not supposed to marry her. How is a Kohen going to marry a Kohen is not allowed to marry a convert? So, not sure. Here the Gemara says that the 8 prophets that were all Kohanim. I'm sure everything that I'm saying has been discussed. I'm just looking at this right now over here. So that, but nevertheless, so they came from Rachav the Zoina, and who are they? Neriah and Baruch, Ushriya. Now, it's interesting that these are all fathers and sons. So you see, like Neriah and Baruch. It's Baruch ben Neriah. Neriah was Baruch's father. And Shriya was, Mechasya was his father. And Chilkiyo, Yirmiyahu ben Chilkiyo was his father. Chanamel v'Sholim, Sholim was Chanamel's father. So these are 4 sets. We'll see the Gemara later on. Sons and fathers. But they were all Kohanim. Okay, all 8 were Kohanim. If the father was a Kohen, the son was a Kohen too. Now, the question is, again, you see anything quickly in the commentary, in the art scroll over there? I didn't look it up. You see any comment? There must be a comment over there. We'll see soon, because the Gemara is going to say specifically that she converted. But how would it be a Kohen over there? That would be. How would that be a Kohen? All right. So let's just say. So, anyways, so that's what the Tanakama says. Rabbi Yehuda adds. He says, "Av Chulda Haneviyah, even Chulda the prophet. The prophet is also mibnei Boneho Shel Rachav Hazoina, was also from the children of Rachav the Zoina. So he adds an 8 male prophets. He adds, Rabbi Yehuda, a woman prophet. What is the connection? Again, the Gemara makes an allusion, a very difficult one, because Ksiv Hocha ben Tikva, again, when it talks about that pasuk we quoted before, where it says ben Cheres, ben Harches, ben Charches, also says ben Tikva, and over there it says as tikvas chut hashoni, that she hung out the red string of hope, that she was going to save them, going to show them where she lives. So she hung out. So the word here is tikva in relationship to Chulda's husband. Chulda's husband was Ben Charchas Ben Tikva. And over there in Yeshua, it says Tikvas Chut Hashoni. So somehow we made the connection. That means that she comes and she's a descendant from Rachov as well. So what does it seem from here? That she's not a descendant of Yehoshua, but rather she's a descendant from Rachov. So how is that a contradiction? Being a descendant from Rachov, how does that contradict being a descendant of Yeshua as well? So that's what the Gemara says. Amar lei. So he answered to him, Ina Sovo, the eye of the elder, or Ba'amrilo, are the people that he told him, Pasya Uchmo, meaning burnt pot, like black pot, meaning used a lot, somebody used a lot. So he says, Miniu Minoch, this time Shmaita, it's for me and you that this halacha is learned. Basically, it means it's not me or you, but it's both of us, which means that he was both. Chulda was both a descendant from Rachov, and she was a descendant from Yeshua. To say, the truth will come up between the two of us. They were both of them. What happened? The Igaira, she converted. The Nosba Yeshua, and Yeshua married her. So here Rashi uses the Gemara uses the Lashon, the Igaira, that she converted. So that means that the Rachav converted, and she married Yeshua. Now, Yeshua wasn't a Kohen, right? He was from the Shevet Ephraim, Yeshua ben Nun. And over there we have Kohanim that went from Rachav Zayna. So she could have had, maybe after she married the Kohanim, then she married Yeshua. I don't know. Yeshua wasn't a Kohen. I don't know how she could be both. She must have been another marriage, not from the same marriage. Because it says before that there were Kohanim that came out from her. So I got to look this up a little further. But the Gemara says the guide of Yeshua. Yeshua married her. And from there she had Chulda Hanaviya, and then also there was Neriah. I wouldn't like to think that maybe she had a prohibited relationship with those Kohanim, and so it wasn't. But that would mean, let's say there was a Kohen that had intimacy. Would he lose the Kohanim? He would be a cholol if he had a relationship. I don't know. If he had a relationship with a non-Jewish woman, with a non-Jewish woman would also not. All right, I know. I have to look this up. Ron, can you help me out over there? What does the Archkel Gemara say?
I have to look at it. I don't have it open.
Oh, you don't have it? Okay, let's go back to it. I'll look it up and I'll come back next time and I'll look up the answer. Okay. Frag die Gemara, The Gemara has another question. The Gemara says, Umi havele zarele Yehoshua. Did Yehoshua then have any children? The Gemara doesn't think that Yeshua had children. So how could Huldah be a granddaughter from Yeshua? He didn't have any children. Voksiv. The pasuk says Divrei Yom Aleph in Perek Zayin. It says Nun benoi Yeshua benoi. Nun benoi Yeshua benoi. The Torah counts over there the lineage. It says the son was Nun. Hold on 1 second. In Divrei Hayomim over there, it gives you the lineage. So it says his son was Nun, and his son Yeshua was his son. And then it doesn't go beyond Yeshua. That means that there was no other sons over there. So that means that's where it ended. The chronological order in the Divrei Hayomim, he enumerates all the children, and as it goes on, but it finishes with Yeshua. It doesn't say anything about Yeshua. That means that there was no other children then. So the question is, he didn't have any sons. He didn't have any children. Look, let's see Rashi. Nun b'noi Yeshua b'noi. As Shevet Ephraim meyaches hakosuv ad Yeshua. The tribe of Ephraim, the verse gives the lineage up to Yeshua. But Yeshua lemato lo yichasish. But from Yeshua below, there's no lineage over there. So that means that there was no, how could Huldah be his granddaughter? And the Gemara answers is not a question. Why? Because Bani lo havele, while he didn't have any sons, benatan havele, but he had daughters. So that pasuk over there, Nun b'noi Yeshu b'noi, is only talking about sons. It's not talking about Zarid, not talking about daughters. Bani lahavele, benatan havele. Okay. So this ends the page on Yudalet Amud Beis, and now we'll go to Tezvav Amud Aleph. Okay. So before, the pasuk says that there were 8 prophets. The Gemara says, right? And the Gemara mentions in the 8 prophets, so there's 4 of them. He says like this, these are the 4. You have Neriah and Baruch. The main prophet that we know of is Baruch. That's the main prophet we know of. Neriah was his father. It was Baruch ben Neriah. So we know Baruch, we found him, and his father is Neriah. And then you have Shriya, we know that he was a prophet, and then his father was Machasya. Yirmiyah, we know, and Chilkiah was his father. Hanamel, we know, and his father was Sholem. So basically, we know 4 Nevi'im. We know Baruch, we know Shriya, we know Yirmiyah, we know Hanamel. But the other ones we don't know. So the Gemara is asking, Bishloime inhu mefarshi. I understand they are clear. Elavasayu, but their fathers, Minolam. How do we know? So Rashi explains, Bishloime Yirmiyah v'Chanamel. If you talk about Yirmiyah and Chanamel, these 2, Iksiv, it says, Vayove Elai Chanamel ben Doidi Kidvar Hashem. So the pasuk clearly says, and it came to me, Chanamel ben Doidi Kidvar Hashem, So that covers Yirmiyah and Chanamel. Yirmiyah, we don't need a pasuk altogether, but Chanamel is covered over there. So how do we know Chanamel? So Chanamel, because it says it's Yirmiyah. Chanamel is why? Because the Ksiv pasuk says Vayovel Chanamel ben Derik var Hashem. So that takes care Chanamel. Now, what about Baruch Shriya? What about that Baruch Shriya? So So we find that Baruch and Shriya were students of Yirmiyah. A student means that they were also prophets. Where do we see that Baruch and Shriya are students? Baruch Diksiv. By Baruch it says, Bipiv Yikore Elias Advorim Ha'ela. From his mouth. This is Yirmiyah saying. From his mouth, the mouth of Baruch, these words were read to me, and I would write down on the book with ink. So we see that he was a student of Yirmiyah, Baruch. And Vishriya is B'toich Sefer Yirmiyah in the book of Yirmiyah, that he told Shriya b'Mechasya. So what is the first thing we proved? That they were students. The next thing we're going to say, we find that those who were students of the Nevi'im, that they were prophets themselves. We say, we find that the spirit of Eliyahu rested on Elisha, and Yeshua was also a Talmud of Moshe. Yeshua was a student of Moshe. So we see that a student gets prophecy. So first Rashi proved that both Baruch and Shriya were students of Yirmiyah, and now we know that a student, that means that they get prophecy. Olakamon Tanya Bibraisa, the Rashi says, Beferish, it says in the Raisa later on, Baruch ben Neriah, or Shriya ben Mechasya. So we're numerating them. It says Baruch ben Neriah, or Shriya ben Mechasya, Daniel, Mordechai, Chagi, and Zechariah, and Malachi. Kulam nisnabu b'shnas time l'Daryavish. They were all prophesied in the second year of Daryavish. So what is the Gemara? So it seems, so we see clearly that Baruch and Shriya were prophets. But the only thing we find Yirmiyah was a prophet, Chanamel was a prophet. We know that Baruch was a student. We know that Shriya was a student. But how do we know all their fathers? How do you know Chilkiyahu? How do you know Shilom? How do we know their fathers? And the Gemara says Kidu Ula. This goes like Ula. The Omar Ula, for Ula said, Kol Mokim Sheshmoi B'Shem Ovid B'Nevius. Whenever the Torah mentions you, his name, the name of the prophet, and it says to you Ben, the name of the father, when it's talking about the prophecy, then you know that he's a Navi. If when the Torah describes the prophecy, the Torah says the name plus the name of the father, then you know it's a Navi, the son of a Navi. If the Torah writes just Shmoi, his name, V'loi Shem Aviv, and not the name of the father, then you know he's a Navi, but not the son of a Navi. If the Torah writes Shmoi B'Shem Eirem Mefurish, it says the name from this city, it says clearly what city it is, then you know he comes from that city. The Torah enumerates which city he's from. Shmoi V'loi Shem Eirem, if it's his name, but it doesn't say where he comes from, B'yadua Shehu Yerushalayim. So then we know that he's from Yerushalayim. Anytime there's no name, we know that the Navi comes from Yerushalayim. If there is a name of a city, then we know that's the name where it comes from. So basically, where's the hint? So the Gemara asked, how do we know that the father were prophets? And what's the answer? Because the Torah mentions, the Pasuk mentions them as the son of. When it talks about the prophecy, that means that the father was a prophet as well. Okay, Masnisatano. There's another thing. In the Bryce, it says as follows. Kol shemaisov u'maisa avoisov stumim. You know, you have people, you don't know whether he was a good person, or a bad person. We don't know his maisov, his actions, and what his father did. Stumim. Stumim means they're closed. They're not known to us. So we don't know. We don't know who the son was. We don't know the father, whether they're good people, bad people. But then, and then by one of them, either the father or the son, the Torah specifically says a praise about one of them. Kegoin, as for example, in the case in Tzfanya, Aleph, it says, Dvar Hashem, Asher Hoya el Tzfanya ben Kushi ben Gedalia. So, even though we have no idea who this Kushi, who this Gedalia is, Biyadua, but we know Shu Tzadik ben Tzadik. We don't know who the parents are. But if the Torah tells you, in this case, the Torah was talking good about Tzfanya. The full pasuk reads, unidentified, not sure why, but the full pasuk reads, I don't have the pasuk over here, but it's talking about something good. So we know he's a tzaddik ben tzaddik. The kol sheparat l'chakosu be'echad mehem l'gnai. If the Torah says something derogatory, kegoin, v'hi b'choyim hashvi bo Yishmael ben Netanya ben Elishama. So this Yishmael went and he killed Gedalia ben Achikam. That's why we have the term Gedalia. So the Torah tells us bad about Yishmael. So B'Yadu Shu Rasha ben Rasha. We know he's a Rasha, the son of a Rasha. That also Netanya and also Elishama are all Rishoyim. Not sure these didn't show. All right. So Yishmael ben Netanya, who shorted Gedalia ben Achikam, he called him. So that was the Rosh. So the Gemara basically says, from a lot of things that doesn't say, we can read in, who the people were. So that's where we can tell that they were also Rishoyim. But for some reason, I think it doesn't only apply to the father directly, but it also applies to the grandfather. Even though the Gemara says, Yedu Shu Rasha ben Rasha. But I think it's Yishmael ben Netanya ben Elishama. Oh, here goes the same thing is Tzfanya ben Kushi ben Gedalia. Who is the tzaddik? Just Kushi or Kushi and Gedalia? Because it has the father and the grandfather. The Gemara just says Maisov or Maisa Avoisov. But Avoisov could mean fathers, like father and grandfather. Doesn't necessarily mean only father. It's not the plural for many people's fathers, but it could be the plural for several generations of fathers. So maybe Maisa Avoisov, fathers is many generations. I think in both of these psukim, it's interesting. There's also a grandfather over there. So maybe this includes, if we're already going to learn, because they mentioned them, and why do we mention them? Just sort of, by the way, tell you the reason he's a Rasha, because blame it on the father. So then blame the father and the grandfather. And I'm not sure. What about further? I'm not sure about that. Yeah, hello? I'm in the middle of a class now. Is it? Yeah. No. So get me 8 cases then, 4 and 4. Thank you. Sorry about that. Amar Rab Nachman, says Rab Nachman, Malachi ze Mordechai. Okay, you know what? Let's leave it over here, and we'll continue. Today was a little bit of sorry, wasn't such a okay, but we'll make it up for next time, Mr. Shem. But let's just stop over here, and let's give over something of the parsha. First of all, it's chazak, is to stay strong in the face of all the adversary and in the face of all the difficulty. So when we finish a whole section, So we can say basically chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek, to be strong, and Hashem will help us. And the Parsha Pikudei is interesting. The pasuk starts off, it's the Pikudei HaMishkan. It's the counting of the Mishkan, how they build the Mishkan. Then it says Mishkan HaEdut. It says 2 times. Pikudei HaMishkan, the counting of the Mishkan. The Mishkan of the Edut. Why does it have to say Mishkan, Mishkan? Rashi gives an interesting observation that this represents the 2 Beis Hamikdash that we lost. They were taken. Mishkan also means a collateral. So that means that Hashem took the Mishkan from us as a collateral, which means that even while we don't have the Mishkan, like today, it's still there in a way, or the Beis Hamikdash, which replaced the Mishkan. It's still there, not in a physical way, but it's there in a spiritual way, because a collateral means if somebody lends you money and you you mortgage them, you give them a collateral, that collateral comes back to you. That same collateral as is comes back to you, which is the idea that it's only temporarily. We're going to get back this Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash, was only given as a collateral. But we know that even while we don't have the physical Beis Hamikdash, we still have the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan within ourselves. And it's very interesting to contrast the Mishkan and the Beit Hamikdash. Whatever happened to all the stuff of the Mishkan? What happened to the wood that they built the Mishkan of? What happened to the menorah? What happened to the Aron? So it's brought down in the Gemara in different places. All the things were hidden because the work of Moshe was permanent, lasted forever. Nothing happened to them. They are staying. They're hidden, but they stay. There's a level of permanence. Moshe Rabbeinu built them by the instruction of Hashem, and that has a special power to give it eternity into that, into all the action. So that's why it was never taken away. It was always there. Well, we don't see it, we don't know it, but it's there somewhere. But as opposed to the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. It was burnt. They robbed it. They took away all the stuff. Nebuchadnezzar stole the stuff, and the Achashverosh took it. They took all the things away because that wasn't made by Moshe Rabbeinu. They didn't have that special power. So eternity is expressed in the Mishkan and the self that it lasts forever through the acts of Moshe Rabbeinu. But on the other hand, the place where the Mishkan stood wasn't permanent because the Mishkan moved from place to place. It was one journey here. It traveled for 42 travels, and one day here and another month, years, whatever, the 42 travels. So no place became permanent. But once the Beis Hamikdash was built in Yerushalayim, it's become permanent. You're not allowed to build any other Beis Hamikdash anywhere, only in Yerushalayim. That's the only place. So therefore, what it tells us is also that there is a permanence in the place. Why? Because there too, who chose Yerushalayim as the permanent place was Hashem. And when Hashem chooses something, it makes it eternal. By the third Beis Hamikdash, everything is going to be eternal. The place is eternal as a follow-up. And also all the specifics, the Kalim and everything else is going to be eternal because that's going to have the action of Hashem, Migdash Ad Hashem Konenu Yodacha. But until the time that we get to see the Beis Hamikdash in its physical Beis Hamikdash, we have the responsibility to have our own Beis Hamikdash, which is our homes, our hearts, our minds, our shuls, our study of Torah. They all become the Migdash Ma'at. They become these small sanctuaries, the sanctuaries in which Hashem's presence is felt. In the end of the parsha, we read that the presence of Hashem was so powerful that even Moshe could not enter into there. And the whole idea is the inspiration from the shul, from the study hall, from our involvement, should inspire us so that even when we leave the shul, even when we get involved in the daily, in the mundane, we still need to keep up that flame, that migdash that we have in ourselves. So the fact that we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, we have to keep on going and trying. And Bezrat Hashem, as we're up to Purim and then Pesach, will merit the coming of Mashiach, B'meher B'yameinu, and then we will have the redemption. I thank you all for joining me. Mitzvah Hashem, join everybody next week, same time, and hopefully I'll have some of the answers. The main question we had today, we wanted to figure out how was
Rachel's grandchildren
was not Jewish and she converted. How was she allowed to marry a Kohen? How were her descendants Kohanim? And how could she be married to Yeshua? And also the same, also Yeshua wasn't a Kohen. So that was our main question. That I got to look it up and see what's going on over there.
The article says that Rachav, who married Yeshua, was living in a foreign country, but she wasn't foreign.
She was Jewish in the first place?
They said she was living in another country and she wasn't of that country. That's all it's.
But is he bothered by the same issue?
They just want to know how Rachav could have married Yeshua. That's what's coming to answer.
Oh, how could he marry Yeshua? Because they were bothered. But are they bothered how she could have had grandchildren Kohanim?
They don't say that explicitly in the notes.
They don't say that. Okay, so maybe I'm missing something. I'll look at it again and then we'll see. Everybody have a good week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.